Anyway, 6 p.m. tonight. I want to thank everybody for coming. Anybody on Zoom, use your raise your hand feature, or they're participating via phone, use the *9. With that, let's start the flag salute. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Jennifer, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, thank you. Director Bixel?
Here.
Director Crooker?
Here.
Director Espinoza?
Present.
Alternate Director Lindo?
Here.
Director Maldonado?
Present.
Alternate Director McKinnon? Here. Director Ochoa?
Here.
And Chair Alamo.
Present.
Have a quorum.
Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment on any item not listed on today's agenda? Basically online. And
There are no hands raised online.
with that, staff updates, budget update, Michael. Clipper. Only Michael's here today, so
Yep.
I'm gonna say last names.
I'm thinking this is the Michael section in the seats. So for July, ending July 31st, for the West Turlock Subbasin account, we had $1,165,299.43. For the basin account, for the same period of time, we had $580,559.34. I'll be sending out invoices here probably in the next month for the respective agencies, probably in the next week or so. Any questions?
Questions?
Thank you.
On to the other, Michael, Technical Advisory Committee update.
Good updates, Chair Alamo and members of the board. We've seen a real slowdown in new well applications. So since my last report to you about well applications, which was February of this year, we've only received 8, which is a big slowdown. 3 in Stanislaus County and 5 in Merced County. All of these are agricultural wells where the applicant does have access to surface water from TID. So they're what we call supplemental wells, which are consistent with the well program that this board approved a couple of years ago. And the other action by the Technical Advisory Committee last Tuesday, they did approve a task order with Todd Groundwater not to exceed $50,000. So we'll be 51% of that cost, so $26,000 or whatever, to start work on the well mitigation plan. That's something we committed to in the revised GSP, and we committed to getting that done by the end of January of next year. So we have 4 or 5 months to get that done. So without wanting to waste any time, we're starting to work on that. Luckily, there are some good examples out there and successful ones. We'll be following those, but we want to get working on that right away. So the TAC authorized that expenditure, which actually was in our budget. So just letting you know. Any questions for me?
Thank you. Okay, I don't know if the calendar is appropriate here. We only have one item in the consent calendar, so we'll just go straight to that motion. I want a motion approving the minutes of the July 11th special meetings of the West Turlock Subbasin.
So moved.
Properly moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Moving on to agenda items, groundwater accounting structure agreement. Michael Cook.
Members of the board, this is the main event, 4 years in the making. I'm happy to report to you success in resolving our challenges with East Turlock GSA. So here we go. So this was, let me get my notes. This was an outstanding item we had when we adopted the GSP 2.5 years ago. We ideally wanted it done then, but we said that this board set a schedule to complete that work. We got a little bit behind, but we did get there in the end. And so the goal is by getting this obstacle out of the way, we can get to groundwater implementation, kind of put our differences behind us and move forward. So what this does is develop a mechanism to account for groundwater in the subbasin It assigns shares in that groundwater to the West Turlock and East Turlock GSA. It does not assign water rights or affect existing water rights, but just assigns shares to use the water that's there in the subbasin. And again, as I mentioned, it allows us to kind of put that issue behind us and start working together on groundwater sustainability in the subbasin. So the terms kind of look like this. So what it was all about is developing what we call developed supply. So we have native supply, which is the natural percolation into the groundwater from rainfall and from the rivers. And then the developed supply is water that comes effectively from diversions from the Tuolumne River, which is surface water application on crops. So whatever doesn't get taken up by the crop percolates into the groundwater and sits there as groundwater. Under law, surface water is applied and ends up in the groundwater still is considered surface water, not groundwater. So it's kind of this, it's developed water, not natural water. So it's kind of been a complicated process anyway. We got there. So we allocated shares in that through this agreement. So the West Turlock gets 170,000 acre feet of that, and the East Turlock gets 20,000 acre feet of that. And we also, part of that agreement is to how much reduction in deficit do we have to get to in terms of groundwater overpumping. The West Turlock has no obligation because we're not an overdrafter. We tend to be a net recharge of the aquifer over time. Obviously, the East Turlock has typically an annual overdraft of about 140,000 acre feet, and that's their obligation to reduce that over time. And so it's we've kind of got this three-pronged approach to sustainability. So the first part is demand management by East Turlock GSA, and this is an important thing for the TID board. And East Turlock grasped the concept too as we worked on the revised GSP. So they need to work on reducing their overdraft. They've agreed to about 71,000 acre feet by fallowing 21,000 acres or the equivalent of water over time. And so that's the first part. The second part is this concept called transitional water, which we've spoken about before. And so some of the water, that 140,000 acre feet that's in the subbasin that was put there from percolation from the river, will actually be allocated for a while to the East Turlock. So it's what we consider paper water. So we're saying this is in the basin, it was there from percolation from TID surface irrigation, but for a while you can count some of it as yours, and that effectively reduces your deficit. So it's kind of like a loan over time. But as you start reducing your demand and developing your projects, you need less of that water to make up your deficits. You transition away from using it, and that's where the idea of transitional water came from. So over time, they can use or account for about 130,000 acre feet of that, but over time, over a 20-year horizon, they wean themselves off of that and get to allocate about 44,000 acre feet of that. To be able to use that water or account for that water in their side of the ledger, they will pay $50 an acre foot to TID. Okay, so that's the way that works. And again, they'll reduce that dependency over time as their projects and programs come into effect. And then the third part of that collaboration is TID has agreed that when their growers have a full allotment of surface water, which is typically 48 inches, or it is 48 inches, they will supply up to 35,000 acre feet of wet water to the East Turlock farmers. So there are some canals on the eastern side of the district's boundary, which go through the East Turlock GSA or the East Side Water District, and they can take water out of that. And that's a program that's been going on for decades, but it's kind of a year-to-year basis at the discretion of the board. The TID board says is like, we'll make that a permanent program. So you can, rather than just hope it's happening this year, you can rely on it. Again, it's only when there's a full allotment to TID growers, which doesn't happen all the time. So it's not a guaranteed source of supply. But when TID growers get 48 inches of supply, that water will be automatically made available to East Side growers, which the goal is hopefully then they'll invest in the infrastructure, the pipelines, whatever they need to do to take advantage of that water when it's available. So when you have a more reliable supply, you tend to invest in that. So what does it do overall? That collaboration allows us to kind of have this kind of manageable, slower transition to sustainability, rather than East Turlock having to overcome this massive deficit right away with significant impacts on farming in East Turlock and on the region. It allows them to kind of move slowly towards sustainability with help from West Turlock GSA. So that's kind of the idea of the whole program here. And again, with the revenue that Turlock Irrigation District will receive, that will allow them to accelerate the projects they have in the GSP. So again, that'll help with faster recharge. So again, more sustainability in the basin. So it's kind of a good win-win for everybody, and particularly for the region and groundwater implementation. And again,
Those are all targeted for that.
and again, that's what part of the agreement is. The revenue that TID receives, they have to put towards implementation of the GSP, move towards groundwater sustainability. That's the other part of the agreement. So again, it's kind of using the resources we have to work together to accelerate sustainability in the subbasin. And the last thing, this is important to kind of show this, that all the efforts are kind of going on out there right now. We talked about some of these when we were working on the revised GSP, but starting with the East Turlock, they have their accounting platform, their multi-benefit land repurposing, demand reduction plan, allocation plan, they're working on use fees, they're retiring land, they're looking at rotational fallowing. So they're already starting working on that demand reduction component, that first component of collaboration. They're already working hard on that, getting a head start. And then in the West Turlock, particularly the Turlock Irrigation District, there's some projects that are happening right now, like with regulating reservoirs, canal automation, some recharge programs that the TID board approved earlier in the year. So that idle lands, lands that are fallow this year, that aren't being planted, kind of an orchard's been torn out, they're not replanting. TID provides water for free, so they can just use that pour onto the field to percolate into the ground and do recharge and other things like that. And the district's also looking at subsurface recharge, some pilot programs that were explained in our capital budget last Tuesday to the board, where we would take effectively perforated pipe, put it below the ground, and put canal water in it and allow that to percolate into the aquifer. So all kinds of things that the Turlock Irrigation District is looking at and hopefully will develop over the next few years. So again, what this does, those 21,000 acres that East Side is proposing to take out of production, allows it to happen slowly over time, protects our local economy. And again, this is kind of a local solution to a local problem. This is us in the Turlock Subbasin solving our problem by working together rather than potential state intervention. So again, the concern is if we don't work together, there's state intervention. We work on 2 GSPs, we're fighting. This gives us the best opportunity to work together and accelerate sustainability in the Turlock Subbasin. So here we are, it's been 4 years. And again, this was approved by the East Turlock GSA first. It was approved by the TID board, and then you're the last agency to sign on. So it's kind of a 3-way arrangement, because this is part of our GSP, and so we need to put this agreement into the GSP, so we got this done. It was a task in there. So that's why you have to approve it. And again, with TID, because of the financial and water arrangements, had to be approved by the TID board. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Eddie?
That is good news.
This is contingent, right, on the GSP being approved, right? Like,
Now you're going negative.
There's always one.
Hopefully, the state
yeah,
goes on with that, yes.
Yeah, it'll look better for it to be approved.
What's the expected timeline on the GSP approval?
Calendar year. And so our thought is we've already submitted the revised GSP, but to submit this document after the fact, one of the ideas batted around the other day, I haven't checked with legal counsel yet, but the DWR does like a public participation process once we submit our plan. So it's out for a 60-day public comment period right now. We could maybe submit this as a public comment from TID, the GSA, City of Houston, whoever wants, we could just figure that out. But that would put this in, at least into the record. And then I could also contact my person at DWR, say, hey, is there a way to get this into the plan right now, or do we have to wait for our annual report or 5-year update? But I figured it's a public document, get it in there and be on DWR's radar.
Second.
Properly moved and seconded. Any Further discussion or comments? Questions? Okay, hearing none, we'll call the vote.
Director Bixel,
Yes.
Director Crooker,
Yes.
Director Espinoza,
Yes.
Alternate Director Lindo, Director Maldonado, Alternate Director McKinnon,
Yes.
Director Ochoa,
Yes.
and Chair Alamo. Thank you very much.